Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Site Reliability Engineering Practitioner Series. We actually interview real-time practitioners who do day in and day out on site reliability engineering and share their wisdom and experience to our community. So we are in episode number 21, and we have a extremely great host and a fellow podcaster, Ravindra Harish, who's a senior VP of Reliability Engineering with Kotak Mahindra Bank. Thanks, Ravindra, for taking time to be with us amidst your schedule. Give us a view of what's been your journey to become on-site reliability engineering. You have had a rich history of how you have gone to different roles before you picked up the whole aspect of site reliability engineering. You've been in the US, you've come back. So give us a little bit of a rundown of your career. Where did you started off and how did it move on? And what made you move towards site reliability engineering and how has been the experience so far?
So wonderful. First of all, I'll get started with expressing my honor onto being here in this show. First, thanks for inviting me onto this. Much appreciated. That being said, you said a lot onto my role of the past, where I've come from and whatnot. I'll do a double click onto it. It was 2016 when I was first exposed to this, to the word SRE. Seriously, before to that, I would also say we from the organization where we started off, we had no much clue about this. Although SRE was really established by Google in 2003, by the time one of the firm where I used to work, we started to adopt only after 10 years, or literally after 12 to 13 years. Right. So the journey of SRE was in 2016. We had by then decided that we need to have a dedicated arm which would look into the aspect of stability of our application rather than entirely depending on engineers to the left and the operations to the right. So, that's exactly where, as the definition of SRE goes, is putting a software engineer, a full stack software engineer, to the problems of operations. Right. And that's exactly where we got started in 2016. It was tough. There is always this debate about, do you want to have all full stack developers to be the SREs, or do you want operation guys to be the SREs? And we believed at that point in time that it has to be a mix of both. Right. So we went on in a journey of hiring some of the best of the stack engineers. At the same time, we brought in some of the best niche operation guys who had the domain-rich knowledge, who had that end-to-end idea of how this whole application is working. And that's how the first SRE unit is formed. And there I joined in as a manager, where we had the responsibility of really forming this team and to really write down a thesis on what we really want to achieve. Right. That's how it really got started. The first couple of years was sort of difficult, and I will tell you the primary reason. It's the mindset. Because sure. As I earlier, when we pulled in some of the engineers from the operations, when these members go to the engineering team saying that, like, I want to do SRE, it was not easy to explain and embed ourselves into SRE mindset because we were exposed as the operation guys. We continue to do still the admin activities, restart the server, go check on, do the incident. So putting that aspect of I'm going to do the monitoring capabilities was a challenge. Anyway, that was my journey in 2016. I served in the United States between 2017 till 2022 out there in States. So that's when I decided to come back. Luckily, the same firm, to name the firm, it's Nike, one of the best companies, which I want to say, working for them. We decided that we're going to have what in India we are calling GCC, right? The Global Capability Centers, which is becoming a boom right now. Many companies are coming in. We first decided to make it happen in 2019, but we really went aggressive by 2021. And I landed in here to just do the same thing what I had done out there in US, to establish a firm. And that's because quite a few verticals, which is the engineering teams, for example, or .com capabilities, or app capabilities, or backend supply chain capabilities, they were all moving into India with their own terms. So we being with engineers, it was only fair for us to come and have an SRE unit here in India. And that's how I landed here. Anyway, that's how the personal side of the work. And then 2 years went by, all the way till 2024, just a month before talking to you here, and that's exactly where we met, which is at Nike, one of the meetups. We established a team. We did the same thing of embedding the engineers, setting some ground rules on how SRE has to work. And we also started working in alignment with our partners in WHQ, what we call the world headquarters, which is in Portland, Oregon. So that's how the journey of 2 years was for me in enabling that SRE capability. Now, in the past couple of months, I've moved on. I'm now into Kotak Mahindra Bank. And as the news goes into the world, it's one of the, probably I anticipate this as an opportunity that I'm moving at a perfect time when there are challenges with respect to technical implementation and the stability of the applications and whatnot. Here I am, very new to Kotak, but the task is very similar. It's to bring in the culture. I think I use the word culture a lot because technically a lot of people could do what we are. I think embedding that culture of taking SRE as a serious activity, which we can talk further at a later point in time. For me, it is always about the mindset of adopting to that culture of SRE is probably going to be one of the important tasks to really implement. I'll stop there. Hopefully, I answered your questions onto the intro.
Absolutely. And thanks, Ravindra, for sharing that. Now, I'll tell you why I wanted to do this session with you. When we met in the SRE meetup at Nike a few months back, I saw the passion which you wanted to bring fellow practitioners to share insights. For me, I would think that is a very important part of a journey, because whatever you have known, until you teach or share your knowledge, it becomes useless. And when someone has the commitment to share, we want to provide a platform so that it could resonate and amplify it to a larger part of the ecosystem. So we are glad that we are having it here. So today, the theme that we're going to talk about is around end-to-end observability. This is one of the most hot topics that everybody is around the world is trying to master. But having said that, it's the most difficult one to think about it. But let's take a step back, Ravindra. Now, organizations worldwide have moved from the aspect of monitoring, which is more like a symptom telling what was broken. We've had the memory, CPU utilization, all of those stuff done. And then they are embarking on observability, which is pretty much like a unknown unknowns and looking at various cues to make it happen. What is your opinion of end-to-end observability? Because for our viewers, let's identify what does observability mean and why do you think it is important, particularly as a site reliability engineer?
Yes. So as you rightly said, it's one of the complicated aspect to the whole stack of observability. And I would also want to quote that cracking it open and making it successful, the chances are minuscule in my opinion. I'll explain why. As you said, end-to-end observability, we are today so good in our journey where we have adopted the concept of agile model. We are buried into the concept of microservices. We are siloed by our practices of the teams. We are smaller teams owning a particular aspect of a functional requirements of engineering. For example, we have front-end teams, we have back-end capabilities, we have a separate data management team, we have a separate DevOps team. So we are scattered all over the places. And as I say, most of the times it's the human problem because we get into our world of silo. And in that, we all are trying to do the right things, no doubt about it. Joining the dots collectively for the success of a whole product, if you want to call it, or a whole organization is where, in my opinion, the challenge really lies. And that's exactly the reason where end-to-end monitoring or end-to-end observability really comes in as an aspect of it. That's one. Second, there are other aspects of real technical challenges. And I'll take one example of it, which is usually the firms which are getting very serious with observability on end-to-end monitoring, they are in the system for a very long time, which means they are technically in the system for a very long time, which also means there are quite a few legacy applications which are being sustained into that system for rightful reason for 2 to 3 decades, which means those engines which are running are pretty outdated from a standards of in the current days and whatnot. They are probably your own on-premise type of applications, and they are not totally converted into cloud and all. And the best of this adoption of SRE and observability, what has really evolved, and the best of the products which are come to market, also excel in the latest technologies. Like it's so easy to plug in to the cloud capabilities. It is so easy to plug into any sort of programming languages that you want to think of. But plugging it into legacy application becomes a challenge. Now that's where your nice traversal, not just the paper problem, which I highlighted, but the nice technical problem of connecting the dots stop at a point where you're now incapable to connect into an area which doesn't leverage you to connect, either through metrics, logs, or traces.
Correct.
And in end-to-end, you need a web connection to really tell you the whole product, how is it looking, where is it failing, how is its performance for both from infra standpoint and application performance standpoint. You need a connection from the UI all the way going into your whatever type of backend. And that's where the challenge is. So where I'm going with this, end-to-end observability, observability is a mode of having a visibility, not just for your engineers, not just for your operations, more so to give a visibility of the success, return on investment, and the capability of the product running to your business, product, consumers, customers, whatever. That's end-to-end observability. Because observability is many times, in my opinion, again, as misregarded to the fact of something as a technical capabilities alone, just to prevent some issues. In my opinion, it's not. It's a fact of giving a visibility of the whole application and the product at various granularity. Engineers would look into the error rates, etc., etc. Businesses are looking like, okay, what are the transactions coming in? How many customers are really stepping in and placing an order? And the product team is really looking at the success of their product enablement as part of the UI going into all the backend. So that's end-to-end observability, in my opinion. And then I went on to sort of call out the couple of challenges: the human problem because of the silo type of establishment what we have, and the technical challenges because of the applications what we have, which probably enables or not enable us to really connect through it. So I'll stop there.
So let's take a very good way of looking at that is that the observability as an element has got its own misconception, as you rightly said. It's going around making sure that we are not in silos, we are trying to collaborate and work through it. But there is another fundamental problem, is that how do you educate this whole value chain? And why observability is even important at the first place? Because all I care about is I am done. This is all looking good for me. My metrics all looks green, right? The watermelon syndrome of all looks green from my end, but it's bleeding from the other end. So that education to create everybody to understand the end-to-end value chain of why the customer experience or the customer journey matters. How difficult is that? Because for me, that's the biggest struggle that I work with a lot of companies when I do consulting, is everybody is good enough and happy because they've been doing well, whether it's legacy or on cloud native applications. But the problem is that how do I instill the why I need to care about beyond my scope of work on the left-hand side and the right-hand side? So how has been that experience in your experience, in your viewpoint of creating the why for everybody to think this is important and educating people across the value chain?
So let me take up. I read two particular questions in it. Why and how. I'll go with the how first, because I think why part is pretty clear that we all are in silo. Everybody is so committed to the functional requirements. This is what I call it as the vertical requirements, because we are there to serve a particular requirement coming from our business, because ultimately they're funding our projects and whatnot. So I need to have a website, I need to have a clicks, and then that needs to transfer into revenues for our companies. So that is very important. What happens out of that is, as we establish with all these different teams enabling, the members who are associated onto it are so aggressive in completing the task. The idea around observing the end-to-end ideally goes into the backseat. How many times for the best of the answer for me is in the language I come from, there's a proverb with the say Shankadinda Bandrane Tirtha. It translates itself to like when a water turns into a holy water only when a priest really gives it to you, type of a thing. So that's where I usually say a commitment and a vision from the top-down approach is very important here. When the leadership understands, at least by looking to the data, by the failure points, whatever we've been seeing, the downtimes of the past and whatnot, when they really understand that what's happening, it's very easy to realize the fact that it's bleeding because of multiple entities, multiple teams, the hops and stuff like that. So my point being, I'm going on to the how part of it. One way is definitely leadership really buying onto the fact of we are committed to have an end-to-end observability. That's Once it's there, because then it trickles down to the product, it trickles down to the business, then it trickles down to the engineer. So when they are doing the sprint planning, when they are talking about what technology is doing, there will be a horizontal with a strict enforcement saying that this is how we're going to approach SRE. So there is a single stick of rule explaining like these are the connectivity factors. Because I've seen in the past when the silo increases a lot, they go on with their own words of their own budget. They have the money, they'll go buy their own product, they'll implement, forgetting the fact that how we now connect to the other team.
Correct.
As I said in the start, every team are pretty good in their monitoring and observability. If you want to call observability of that particular silo, they're probably good because the metrics and the logs are coming in for their applications. And whenever there's an alert, they'll probably go and fix it. But the real challenge starts is if you are one of the team where you're connected to the front-end application, which is probably, let's say, checkout operation. But you think, for me, this is where we talk about SLIs and SLOs and whatnot. Oh, this is backend application. I run a batch program. If it fails once in 6 hours, it's not a big deal because it will catch up in the next. But what if that data was so important for the checkout operation in the front and their SLI and SLO sits with an availability of 99.99%? You see the disconnect? That's the problem. So I want to summarize on my long answers. I'm sorry, I keep drifting onto it. But summarizing the fact, my experience tells me, because as a practitioner getting onto the lead, I've felt the pain of not being able to go and convince certain engineering teams that this is important, only because for them it is not a priority at that point in time.
Correct.
So top-down approach at a higher level, at an ELTs or the LT level, committing to the fact that we have an SRE unit, they will define the platform and we will abide to these processes of traces, metrics, logs, so that we can connect to each other. We are not going to do independent things. In my opinion, is the best way of winning this bigger battle. I'll take a pause there.
I think you're right, absolutely. When we observe that the leaders need to look at reliability as a first-class citizen. I always believe that when you put reliability as a first-class citizen, then you step up your game beyond your ways that you have done it. You have done reasonably well. Things have been okay. The customer sat seems to be okay. But I think it's very important to step up your game towards doing that. Is it enough? Is my preparations enough to call me as I'm done? So reliability as a first-class citizen is in a case of nirvana, right? You are you are actually doing your best. You might not reach that ultimatum, but the whole point is that you're not contented with what you do today, and that mere helps you to push yourself beyond boundaries, looking at leaving no stone unturned, taking that extra step. And making it happen. I also believe that the leaders, the executive leadership team or the leadership team should have evangelists who drive this as an organizational transformation. Because the leaders are all, they know upbeat, they see the value of it. But after a particular time, their level of influence to the engineers is very limited, because all I care about is my engineering leader, okay? I don't care about the executive leadership team, because I don't have direct access and they are not evaluating my performance appraisal. Let's be very clear on the word. So the way that it's going to resonate with me is someone from the engineering team evangelizing of why this is important. Similarly, the part of it. So we have seen a role of an evangelist is also about giving that necessary structure and helping them that we are change agents. If we don't step up our game, nobody else can do. Has helped in a lot of those cases to do that. Do you also see that that might help in organization?
Suresh, I can't agree more onto it. I mean, you're absolutely bang on to the point of certain engineering areas where we have that real front runners, engineering leaders. I can go without picking the names and stuff that there are units or verticals in which their adoption to SRE and the seriousness what they were driving onto was so hard and so rooted. Believe me or not, again, picking onto the terms of MTTR, MTTDs, the mean time for resolution, mean time for detection, we changed the game for almost like by reducing the values more than 50 to 60%. It might sound like, oh, what is it, just 50, 60%? No, it's a huge win in the world of SRE to accomplish that. No, you're right. At the same time, this is where the E2E, the end-to-end observability becomes a challenge. We went in, to your point, the best of the engineers, they're rooting into the SRE. The success was amazing into the entire vertical stack of their capabilities. But at the same time, when other verticals, which ultimately talks between to these verticals, right? If we encounter one particular area where either technically or the interest by the engineering leaders for whatever reason, not to really pick onto it. When it goes down, E2E is never a success because their backend capabilities are equally important, the vertical which I'm talking about, for the success of the front vertical. Again, goes back. When you have a strong leader, that particular vertical, when you have the right implementation, right metrics, would do wonders. But for me, the pain point there is it would do wonder for their verticals, their incidents, their storytelling. But did I succeed at an org level? Not really, unless every leader comes onto the same page.
Absolutely. That's bang on. Now, let's talk about how do companies measure end-to-end observability success, because we are always on the mode of OKRs, KRAs, and KPIs. So if someone wants to define success, because this is going to be asked at the board level, at a steering committee level, okay, we spend a lot of money, investment on process, tools, capability building exercise. What's the value? I mean, how do we know that we are in the right path? So how do you think companies should measure the success of end-to-end observability? And is it even a reality that we can measure end-to-end observability?
We can. I mean, so there is no possibility. I go with this line when I got into the corporate world probably 20 years back. There was a very nice lead of me. He had made a statement which resonates in my thoughts even today. And he had said, there's nothing impossible in software. And we are seeing that on day-to-day more with AI and whatnot coming in. So the answer to your first point, is it possible? Can we achieve it? Absolutely yes. But is it painful? Absolutely yes on that matter too. Now, talking about the measuring aspects of it, like how would we really measure? In my opinion, Suresh, it's two sides of the world to calculate the return on investments if you really achieve it, or to even measure if it's really working. That is, and I go to the extremes rather than not. I would exclude the engineering capabilities and the product capabilities.
Right.
To measure the success of this, I go to the extreme other two ends of the world in corporate, which is our first level of defense, what we call the L1 and L2 operations layer, right? Where they are the ones who are getting a call from the customers and stuff like that. And the second is our business, who ultimately paid the entire IT sector to go and implement the websites and the products and whatnot. And let me explain that. Why do I say that? And that's good enough in my perspective. If L1 and L2 are empowered to a level to identify at any point in time where technically something is going wrong. Again, I quote, we are in a world of microservices. From the start of a website, again, I keep saying the example of website only because it's easy for any of our listeners to interpret what we're talking about.
Sure.
A checkout button, and the best example is Amazon checkout button. A checkout button is the most crucial part in any e-commerce website because that is where a consumer is getting converted into revenue, right?
Correct.
And that one checkout button, we think it's like adding it to a cart and like doing the checkout process. No, in the back end, we have stock inventory verification, we have payment verification, we have supply chain availability checks and whatnot. There are probably hundreds of microservices which runs in milliseconds to come back and then say that your order has been placed, which we don't even realize. Now, if that checkout fails and L1 gets a call saying that, look, I have an issue. In a typical world, they probably have some documents, knowledge articles, etc., etc. That's how the typical organizations run. They'll follow that for 15, 20 minutes. If nothing works out, they toss it on to the next in line. And if the issue is at the last somewhere, your tossing goes on. And that's how we talk about MTTR increase and whatnot. Imagine this. If an end-to-end observability has been enabled and the empowerment has done, we have done the shift left, which is to the L1L team. And they have a screen with a lot of circles in a web, which shows precisely where the things are going wrong. Your MTTD, forget it. I mean, we have alerts and stuff. MTTR in today's now a minute is going to be in matter of 15 to 30 minutes for an S1. I'm just saying, where in comparison of 2 to 3 hours or 4 hours, 5 hours, I mean, I've seen cases where an S1 ticket of a checkout and stuff like that goes on for like 8 to 9 hours, which is unacceptable, right? So that's one way of really like getting a consciousness for ourselves. Are we really succeeding? That's what I meant by the extreme part of it, L1 and L2. Now I go to the other side of the extreme part, because this is where end-to-end observability is not just the technical services failure type of observability, in my opinion. For me, it is about how well the storytelling is happening through a technical dashboard to our business users as well. Can business user understand that the entire journey of the consumers for the company, is it visible for them? Unless you have the traceability, unless you have the connected dots presented in a technical way onto your website, For example, you may go all the way to your cloud platform because you have a good, easy connection, but then you lose connection to your supply chain because it sits in a mainframe or something like that. Then business users will not have the full story to it.
Correct.
So consolidating my answers for me, how to measure and to really get into consciousness of did I succeed in end-to-end observability is by making two sectors of our enterprise and the pillars to be happy. One is our L1 team. Are they empowered to understand where the issue really lies? That's a success of end-to-end observability. And the business, can they understand the story of the success of their own product for which they funded? And if they are able to tell like, oh, I see how many consumers are coming, how many stuff is converting, and how much has been the success rate, how much of technical failures have been, all through a dashboard, which could be a very fascinating level, end-to-end observability is achieved. Now, have I seen it in my own journey all these years? Very shamefully, probably not, because of quite a few challenges and stuff like that. I'll stop there. Hopefully, I answered your question.
Excellent point. Now, the point of measuring some of these aspects is beyond technical metrics. And I'll tell you why this is important. One is we definitely have the visibility of where it starts out. The dashboard clearly tells you what is the weakest link. You go there, kind of fix it out. But it's also about the experience index. And let's talk a little bit about the experience index, because the experience index is saying that I had a few milliseconds of latency issues before I could get this done. Now, and I'll give you an example of what is. I was watching a IPL game, and this was a few years back. So I'm watching this game. There is a wicket. Let's say RCB was a CSK. There was a wicket that falls down. I'm not able to see the wicket, but suddenly a person on my top floor starts shouting, and I'm just amazed. Why are they shouting suddenly? Everything is going to be lost, and there is a few milliseconds of delay, a lag, and I'm seeing the ball bowled. I'm not able to see that and I'm getting frustrated as a consumer because the whole point was getting a live to live update. So I just don't want us to miss the consumer experience index, because it might be great with all your metrics and dashboards, but my experience with my gadget or a device that I'm seeing it is a horrible one. So I think we should not lose sight of that as well, encompassing in the overall end-to-end observability aspect of it.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. That's right. Going back on, I just want to relate your answer, which is so valid, to the point which I said on the extreme, because when you look in this L1 and L2 or the business users, at the end of the day, even these two strong entities or the pillars of an organization, what are they aiming for? The best experience of the consumers. Because business has grabbed the requirements to improve the revenue stream of a company because they're there to please the consumer. L1 and L2 are there to serve the consumer because something has really gone wrong. So at the end of the day, ultimately, we are here to serve our consumers. And SREs, in a way, in Nike, we had this strong statement saying serve athletes.
Correct.
And it's a very strong statement, although it's just a 2-word. And athlete always has an asterisk in our company at Nike when we used to. It's anybody with a body is an athlete. And it goes on with an explanation of the consumers whom we sell is an athlete. The customers, where we do the wholesale selling and stuff like that, the store staff in every retail stores and stuff like that, who are in turn serving our consumers, they are athletes. And the technicians and the technical squad, which are ultimately building everything in the world, they are athletes. So the point being, serve athletes. At the end of the day, the Nike says is we need to make sure that everybody are being taken care of so that Nike can flourish. That's
awesome.
the meaning.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. I think I love this whole part of serving athletes. That means everybody starts to have the same, the same statement that resonates, that why are we here? We are serving athletes. So everybody starts to ask this question, how can I make a difference? How can I make a difference? And collectively, this could make a part. Now, we are on to we can talk a lot, but I think we are getting into the crux of this whole zone that I wanted to understand. If an organization wants to implement end-to-end observability, we have talked a lot about it, how much it's difficult, how much we need to do that. Two parts, right? Like, how do you implement the end-to-end observability, and how can we make this as a mainstream practice? Because today, I think if everything is okay, then we will talk about end-to-end observability. So it is still not as picked up as a mainstream practice. But let's come to the second part. The first part is, what is your practical ways to implement end-to-end observability? Where do you start? How do you go about it? A journey, if everybody is embarking on that, where do you start and how do you see that we take that baby steps to reach that destination?
Yeah, that's a good point. Baby steps, because that's very, it's a catchy phrase here. A big win, a big bang theory is not going to happen in the world of E2E. Absolutely, for sure. So baby step. And I want to define parallel streams of baby steps here. And the first parallel stream is definitely, which we talked about, we touched on, the buy-off, an agreement from the top leadership and stuff like that. I mean, you might have staffs and stuff, but nevertheless, just having staff is not going to help. So in my opinion, and then buy-off is a long process of its own, right? So that's why I say it's a parallel execution. You don't need to just talk, wait, and not do anything out there, because there could be a technical progression too. So that's why my first parallel stream to execute is a buy-off. Get hold of, as you use the words of a strong, and I keep missing onto the word, a supporter, basically.
Correct. Evangelist.
Onto the work, yes. And second, from a technical aspect, like if I am the SRE leader and if I'm really thinking a strategic initiative of how to make it happen, here's the thing, E2E, you said that it comes at a later stage. It can't be the first step at all. E2E is probably is a North Star. And it's only fair because if you don't have a minimum amount of observability embedded into your own system of how to get metrics, how to get logs, how to get traces, then forget the story about joining the dots. Okay. So that's why observability has to be the first step. Right. And now, assuming that every team, everywhere, and we have identified the applications and whatnot, it's there with some capability. Here is a real answer for your question, if I'm really focusing on E2E. It starts with the journey of identifying CUJs, in my opinion. To explain to the listeners, it's either you call it consumer user journey or critical user journeys. Right. We need to know, and a solid example for CUJs, what I referred in the past, a click of a checkout button. Right. That's the consumer user journey. And incidentally, it also happens to be the most critical user journey. Right. So my step one is making a list of tier 1 and tier 2 applications, which defines a CUJ. Right. Again, example, checkout button. Now, once you have that, your step 2 is, as an SRE, again, my answer is in an alignment of SRE sits at an horizontal level to your verticals. Okay, let that be very clear. Sure. Now we have the capacity with engineers, embedded SREs and whatnot to go and identify the rightful teams, applications, and services associated to all of these tier 1 and tier 2 identified CUJs. Right. Once we have that, the third step will be to really have and I'll tell you why it's helpful, but really to have SLIs and SLOs identified at the service levels for those identified CUJs. Sure. Okay. Once you have that, I tell you, as I said, I want to explain the benefit of this. When you start doing this, SLI and SLO is not an independent activity. It's not that one SRE goes and says that, oh, I've looked into your data, I have a baseline, so you need to be 99.99 on availability. That's not how it goes. You need to have a buy-off from product, mostly the business, the engineering teams. It's a consolidated work. That's why SLI and SLO have two different streams of it, Suresh. One is a paper sketch. You work with all these products and say that, like, okay, what are our agreements onto this for the success of this work? And second is implementation on your tools. Where you will go use products like SignalFX, Splunk, or Grafana, or whatever you're going to use, and streamline that implemented dashboards of SLI. Sure. So once you do this work, the benefit there is, you remember we talked about the challenge of getting all the teams together. That starts to happen by these processes, because as an SRE, you're working through these streams to bring them on board. Right. With a constant agreement of, look, we are trying to achieve this. Are you on board or not? Right. And when you're trying to do this, there could be some challenges. There could be some teams which have least priority, whatever way. You will at least now know what the problem is. Correct. Okay, that's why in step 3, I say that you need to do this. You will get a buy-off of the teams, and you're taking everybody on board to have a common journey of end-to-end observability. Right. And the last step, I would not say last step. Don't take it in a sequence. The most other important is identifying the technical challenges which going to come on. If I go back, I said the 2 fundamental problems with E2E implementation is, one is a people mindset, which we can solve by having taking them on board through SLI and SLOs and defining the CUJs and whatnot. We did that. Second is the technical problems. You have a legacy type of application which would not puke out any sort of an information. Now, how would you connect it? And simple answer, not simple answer, architects, we all being smart people and great architects in your organization, stuff like that, he or she with a good domain knowledge, there will always be some way. You can start writing some flat file type of logs and then pump that flat file or an XLS or a CSV type of thing to your whatever tools you're having, say Splunk.
Sure.
And then you can stitch the dots as long as there's some sort of a trace ID of the primary keys and stuff like that. So,
Sure.
but my point is, the step should be to identify the technical challenges where you believe that I can't join the dots to this area. And that becomes take some architects out there, get a buy-off, and really invest some time to do something about it.
Correct.
So will be my approach as an horizontal of SRE unit to really move forward to the step of E2E implementation of observability. I'll take a pause.
Awesome. I think you mentioned, and this is very valuable for our viewers, because you mentioned a step-by-step approach for people to get started. And the most important part is the critical user journey, right?
Yes.
And people don't even know what is critical user journey because all they think is about a customer journey. Now, I can still have a login screen for me, as that is an important part. For me as a user, I care about my login. I care about my payment. I care about my order. So these are my three important parts to see, am I able to do that? Because you are offering a discount and I want to ensure that I'm able to avail the discount at an appropriate time. So for me, as a user, I want to make sure that within this cutoff time, I'm able to get the best deal, I'm able to get the best product and then do it. So I think it's important to understand at a persona level of how this critical user journey is there. And this itself could be a big debate between the teams. What is your definition of a critical user journey and what is my definition? Because once you start debating on this overall, then we need to agree that this is our preferred critical user journeys, because there could be n number of journeys and you cannot make everything work.
Bingo.
So
Yes.
we need to be realistic around and make the people feel, and it's also being inclusive, right? It's not about the SRE's world is the gospel of truth. We need to get everybody into that particular chain so that there is enough amount of skin in the game for people to say that we all contributed to overall goal of making this end-to-end observability work, right? Awesome part of it. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I think we can talk a lot more about that. But one final question, Ravindra, is what does the future of SRE look like with AI, machine learning, everything coming on board? Everybody seems to be upbeat about AI these days. And the site reliability engineer who is trying to lift a heavy baton towards saying that we need to make reliability and end-to-end observability an important aspect. Is there a future? Is there more opportunities? Where do you think the future lies for site reliability engineers?
I'll put it in a couple of strong, important words here. This just exposes the value of SRE. The demand for SRE is just going to increase because with more AI comes in more responsibilities for the organization, which means our commitment to consumer, to serve them, is just amplified now.
Correct.
Which means it's more so important, for example, banking sectors or any other sector, like the faster you adopt AI and stuff like that,
correct,
you're putting yourself into more vulnerabilities.
Correct.
In the way of implementation. So now you can understand why SREs are even further important, because we have a greater job and a responsibility to drive to see the applications are stable, no matter which technology comes in and how we are implementing it. And with this, I wanted to say this in the start when you said about me doing the meetups and stuff like that. I'll quote on to this question of yours. When I first landed in Bangalore 2.5-3 years back, I was shaken off with the way how SRE was perceived in Bangalore. It was pretty quick for me to realize the fact that it's a old wine in a new bottle type of a thing here in India, which is using this fancy word for SRE just for your typical operations. And L1 and L2 and L3 was sold in a new umbrella of the label called SRE.
Right.
And that is where I really took upon. I mean, it was you call it ego, or it was like a sort of like I can't take this fact that everybody trains. Yeah. So, and that's where the meetup concept started to really bring in and spread the word, saying that no, please don't call SREs as don't call production support as SREs. Correct. So the reason I say that to this question of yours is the mindset of SRE, the demand of SRE, and organizations adopting to the concept of SRE as an independent entity.
Right.
It's growing.
Right.
With GCC increasing, SRE's unit, SRE leadership, SRE demand is increasing, Suresh. I'm sure you know better than me onto that matter.
Right.
And that explains, as the demand of SRE and the understanding of the value of SRE is increasing, no matter what type of technology comes in, SRE as an entity to stabilize the application into the world of production is just going to amplify further.
Sure.
AI or not, and AI for sure for more, is going to be important. And that just, I'm optimistic about the opportunities which is going to show up across the world, but more so in India with all the things happening here. I'll stop there.
Awesome. I think you're absolutely right, Ravindra, because in the last month or so, when I looked at the job opportunities for SRE, there are close to about 8,000 SREs that are needed around India part, and it'll only grow. So for viewers, it's a great news. Now, it's very important for all of us to understand that each one of us have our own experience and expertise in handling things. But I think the larger part that I want to call out everybody is to come and join in meetups, because share your own personal experience, because the only way that we can elevate the overall ecosystem is when we share best practices, lessons learned with the rest of the crew. And it's so important that today, Ravindra, that the meetup that we saw, everybody is open enough to admit the problems, the challenges, and it is very heartening to see it is not about X and Y as a company. It's about, hey, we are here, the same problems persist. Can I have a shoulder to cry? And can I have someone to back me up? Because that's the whole part of friendship and support systems, which we can do as an SRE. So I hope to see and meet you again in some of those meetups where we can learn and share from each other. But thanks so much for being with us today and sharing your valuable insights and practical use cases of how end-to-end observability can be achieved. Thank you so much, Ravindra.
Suresh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate that.
Excellent, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this session with Ravindra. We will be coming back next time with another episode with another SRE practitioner. Until then, keep watching and post your questions to us, and ensure that you are following up us on YouTube channels, on podcast as Google Podcast, Spotify, because this is also going to be available on that particular episode. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope to see you in our next episode of SRE. Remember, site reliability engineering is an exciting world, even now, and it will also be in the future. So great things ahead. Thank you so much.